All right, welcome to another episode of Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight on your brain. This will be a very distracted episode because we're doing this while watching football, or at least I am, because the Cowgirls and Nats are about to play. So I'll be paying attention to that instead of Sam. So I'll let Sam talk.
Well, I just finished the Houston Texans versus the Patriots game, which those of you that watched know that the Patriots won by 3 in the end with a last second field goal. So we're going to start with field goals. How many missed field goals were there today? How many missed extra points were there today? There were 3 in this game.
And I'm watching the overtime of the Bengals and Packers here, where Crosby missed an extra point. He missed 3 or 4 field goals in the fourth quarter in overtime. And then the Bengals had a chance to make one, and their kicker missed a field goal in overtime. So
you had one job. One job. No, it's really tough. I kicked a little bit in high school, and I can't even imagine the pressure they're under out there with the timing and everything. But at the same time, you have one job. And Fairbairn missed 2 extra points today, which are supposed to be quote unquote automatic, which they moved them out to make them less automatic. But now I don't know. It was that was a weird rule change they made at some point. And then Nick Folk on the Patriot side missed an extra point, but then made 2 52-yarders in a row. So, it's an interesting thing, the kicking game. These guys are probably more superstitious than pitchers.
Yeah.
Well,
I would have to think so, because at least with a pitcher, you have enough repetitions to get into a rhythm or to work out a kink and get back into a rhythm.
Well, and with field goals, there's a lot more to it because I had the privilege of working with a lot of deep snappers in my strength and conditioning career, and I deep snapped for us when we played for Ladainian a little bit. And there's a lot of timing, and when you're doing the punt deep snap, it's all about speed. But when you're doing the field goal deep snap, you have to be as accurate as the kicker, and the holder has to be as accurate as the kicker, and then the kicker has to be accurate. So you have 3 people in a row that have to be completely on game within millimeters of each other, realistically. And so it's a completely different game, and I understand it. It's a tough gig, and these guys, for some reason this week, all over the league have been put through the ringer. But that's not why the Texans lost, because they lost by 3. They only missed 2 extra points. And the other miss by Fairbairn was a 56-yarder, which no one really, that's like a 50-50 shot, really. When you
I don't remember what the stats are, but I do know that there's a significant drop off in the percentages once you get over 50 yards.
Yeah, and he's got a pretty big leg, and it had plenty of distance, but it was nowhere near where it needed to be. Let's talk penalties. So one of the things about penalties that bothers me is when they become subjective versus objective, right? And in the last moments of the game, and of course we can't blame the whole game on this because there's plenty that went into it, but we had the Patriots had a 3rd and 21 and very nearly threw a pick, but it was dropped, which would have resulted in a punt. But there was a roughing the passer call. And the hit was so light, it knocked the quarterback maybe back 2 steps, and he was just kind of like, oh, okay, I got kind of bumped. But then I got bumped by a helmet. So he started going, come on, draw the flag, refs. And the refs threw the flag because the helmet hit him right here. And so let's take a completely unrelated penalty that is very can be subjective, but there's an objective rule involved with it: pass interference. So if that ball is tipped, there can be no pass interference, right? So if a defender goes up, tips the ball, even if it just barely grazes his fingertip, then down the field, nothing can be called pass interference because it was a tip ball. It's no longer subject to this. So it's a very subjective rule along with this, what could be, or excuse me, objective rule, what could be a subjective penalty, right? And we need to evaluate the roughing the passer, because if there is an offensive lineman's hands on the defender when he touches the quarterback, it should be not subject to roughing the passer, because he was blocked into the quarterback. And realistically, you could have called a holding on that penalty as well. So if the offensive lineman's hands are on the defender at the time, it should not be subject to roughing the passer. It should be a free and clear.
It makes sense along the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense along the lines of your analogy of the tipped ball. It's the same thing in my mind. And that would be a good rule change. It's kind of like I seem to recall they did away with this, but for a while they had changed the roughing the kicker rules. So you had running into, and I think several years back they did away with that, and it's now just roughing the kicker again. But to me, that made perfect sense, because if you just barely graze the kick, the whole point of those kinds of penalties are to protect the players, because you have a defenseless player. Basically, a punter is basically a defenseless player who can get creamed and really hurt if somebody hits him because of his exposed position. So if that's the point of the rule, then you shouldn't get a freebie because you have a kicker who's good at flopping when his cleat barely grazes a defender. And that's the point of running into.
Well, and we're also differentiating between two kinds of penalties. One is a very holding is holding. You grab somebody and hold on, it's holding.
And those are the competitive advantage penalties.
And intent doesn't matter, because you did it, even if it's an accident, right? But a personal foul implies intent. And a roughing the passer is a personal foul penalty, and it should imply intent. So that guy's free and clear, takes 2 steps, whacks the quarterback with the crown of his helmet.
Yeah.
That obvious penalty, right? But if he is being blocked and trying to break through the block and he bumps the quarterback, you got a lot going on there that is unintentional, especially and you got to really differentiate. Did the guy block him into the quarterback and all of the things? So that was a kind of a call that was at a big time in the game, where a little bit of cleanup on the rule. If the offensive lineman is engaged with the defensive lineman, he probably should have a little bit more leeway. So that was a big call, but that's not the reason the Texans lost the game either, even though it led to the game-winning drive, because they would have punted it away, giving the Texans the chance to have a game-winning drive at the time. Laramie Tunzel.
Name rings a bell, but I don't watch a lot of.
So as we discuss with so many different things, I like to look at causes that have kind of snowballing effects. And Laramie Tunzel is our offensive left tackle. And we gave a lot for this man. Let me share this screen here. This is what we gave for this man. Blockbuster trade with the Dolphins. He was supposedly one of the best. We got him and Kenny Stills.
That's why I know the name, because I remember the trade. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we got a 4th round pick plus him and Kenny Stills, and a 6th round pick. So not a whole lot, but 2 supposedly really good players. And I actually like Kenny Stills. He was a good, solid receiver at the time. In exchange, they got 2 first rounders, 2020 and 2021. So we gave away our future for this man, because with him, we could build our future. And of course, that included Deshaun Watson, who is out for other various reasons right now. Yeah. So we gave a lot for this man. Now, after that, we also paid him a lot of money, $66 million 3-year extension. So we're talking $22 million a year, but of course that's ascending as they go, which is part of the problem. It should be descending when you talk about age of players, but we gave a lot for this man. And somewhere around the early third quarter, he went out with a hand injury. And he's sitting on the sideline perfectly fine with a hand injury, and actually comes in too late. So they had to call a timeout early because he came in too late for a field goal try. And so the timeout was huge. He's not in. Early in the game, we were running away with the thing. They let this rookie quarterback go, Brett Favre, and he was performing today, which is going to have mixed results throughout the season. But if you let him go, some days you're going to have 4 touchdowns. Some days you're going to have 4 interceptions. That's the way rookie quarterbacks go.
Yeah.
Especially since he's got a pretty big arm. So he was going. And part of that process was the fact that we had a left tackle that could block anybody coming through. Now, all of a sudden we lose that guy. So they had a chip block with the tight ends or the running back. And the game became much more conservative at that point because we had the, basically second string, maybe third string on some teams, left tackle in the game. And he's sitting on the sideline perfectly fine, except for whatever quote unquote undisclosed hand injury this is, which, as an offensive lineman, the only way a hand injury affects you is if you plan on holding. So why the hell is he not out there?
Well, not entirely, because you do want to get your hands up there, especially in pass blocking. So if it's something that's going to cause a lot of like pain such that it's going to affect your form and your ability to get a hand up there in pass blocking, especially, okay. But how many times have we seen somebody with a splint that they just put a 5 miles of gauze around, or even guys with a whole glove or club on, and you get back out there? So yeah, it makes me scratch my head and say, well,
tape that shit up.
What kind of a hand injury was it where you couldn't take him back in the locker room real quick, tape it up, give him a big old mitten of tape on to protect that hand and get him back out there? That's odd.
Yeah. So when you look at the way the game played, how close it was and how many plays it was dependent on, having a 5-star left tackle when you have a rookie quarterback who was sacked more in those basically the Patriots just teed off at that point. They started blitzing every play. They were coming through clean. He was running for his life. The run game became non-existent. And and penalties added up because you had a young guy in there. The penalties were horrible. There was one, it was Ingram ran for 14 yards on a 1st and 10, called back for holding on the back side of the play. So not even on the run side of the play.
Oh, those drive you crazy.
And it came back in 3 and out at that point. And then that set up a punt, which they ultimately were going to fake, but then decided to pull back, and the punter didn't go back far enough. And he got the snap and kicked the ball into his own guy's helmet, which ended up in a 0 net yard punt and set up another field goal. So it was, things just started falling apart at that point. And when you've got a guy who's paid $22 million a year, and he has a hand injury, which he can use his hand because they kept showing him on the sideline, and he was basically doing this and twiddling his thumbs and all kinds of things. So what was it with this hand injury that made it disqualify, even going out there when your team needed you? Okay, so we're up by 15, whatever. Okay, maybe out, but now we're only up by 7. Maybe we need you.
Yeah.
And it's time to step up to the plate because this is what we pay you for. And of course, we're old school. We remember the days of Dick Butkus and, going out there where blood's just pouring out of a bandage they tried to put on.
Yeah.
Him. So it's a little bit different of a perspective, but so many things we talk about on this podcast go down to the to that mentality. And this is the NFL now. And my finger hurts.
Well, and that's because we in the preseason we ranted about the NFL and their wokeness and how it was turning us off and turning other people off. And
But this is something that was going on before that that was actually turning off fans.
exactly. And that is part of I think that's all part and parcel with it. I think I've used this analogy before. It's like when McDonald's started stocking salads because people who don't go to McDonald's were complaining about how unhealthy their food was. And their their profits started to reflect that, started to take a hit. There's a reason there a bunch of other fast food restaurants have been starting to get bigger and bigger. It's because McDonald's, the big boy, was getting smaller and smaller. And it was because they kept reacting to, oh, I remember when I heard this and I said, huh, no wonder. The McDonald's French fries when I was living in Germany tasted way better than American French fries. They tasted like McDonald's French fries used to taste. And I found out later why. It's because the secret ingredient to McDonald's French fries,
Sugar.
no, actually,
No?
no, it's not that. They used to cut their fry grease with beef tallow. And that's what gave it that little bit of extra savory goodness that
I knew
made
they
those.
injected the potatoes with sugar, but I didn't know about
No, I
the
mean
beef tallow.
there is that too, but the thing that made them so good, especially fresh, was they used to put beef tallow in their fry grease, and then vegetarians threw a fit. What vegetarian is going to McDonald's anyway? So it's the same thing here. Is the NFL started reacting to people who weren't really football fans in the first place. A lot of the CTE and concussion stuff was coming from not fans and not necessarily even the players, because there have been players that have complained about this, especially, obviously the defensive guys that have complained about and said, look, it's a risk. We know it's a risk. We step in and we do it because it's worth the reward if we get that big payday and because we love the game. There have been numerous players, current and especially former, who have said that, but the NFL started reacting to all the bad press, all the people, and you got to throw in the obnoxious turds in Congress in this too, because they started making noise about how they were going to have to step in and investigate to, to figure out what's going on here. And it was, I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole, but if you look into it, there's a lot of garbage science involved too, which is another thing we complain about. But the point here being that the NFL brand has been ruining the league. The players, the individual teams, they may make the product good enough for people to still want to watch, but the brand is causing a lot of that excitement and enthusiasm to wane.
Well, you've got a two-part equation when you really look at it. It's two entities that are actually ultimately trying to fight to ruin it more.
Mm-hmm.
One in the name of profit and trying to expand their profits, and the other in the name of players' rights, I should say. So you've got the NFL and the NFLPA,
Mm-hmm.
and both of them are the fight that's going on is actually putting it in the negative direction. So
yeah.
one is trying to outdo the other in a way, and in the name of the owners for profit, and in the name of the players for union shit. But both of them are going in the negative direction because we want to see touchdowns and all that stuff, but we also don't want to see games decided on a penalty.
Yeah. We want to see those touchdowns come from exciting plays, not because you ended up on the 1 yard line because you got a bogus pass interference call in the end zone. And that was something I was going to bring up when you talk about penalties, is that a lot of these nonsense penalties come from wanting to protect those big dollar quarterbacks. The silly, you can't go in low on a quarterback anymore. That had been happening for decades, but then Brady what did he tear his ACL and his MCL, I think, when that happened in a playoff game. And they know from their numbers that when you start putting in backup quarterbacks, especially when these backup quarterbacks, aren't Tom Brady or Dak Prescott or whoever, and play really well, their ratings take a nosedive. Their money goes down. So they've started to institute more and more rules based on not protecting the players per se, but protecting the players because that protects their money. And it's watering down the game. And I've got a couple of points to spin off here of people who have had some good analogies that I really liked. About a week or so ago on a Jason Whitlock show, he said he had a good analogy that the NFL is comfort food. It's those, for him, it's wings. He loves hot chicken, and he loves.
Wait, hey, hold on.
Wings.
Your video's kind of stuttering.
Oh no.
Yeah. Your voice is fine, but well,
okay,
as good as it ever is. But
well, yeah, these things happen. All right, did it smooth out?
Might be getting worse.
Do we need to pause for a second?
Let's try that. So for everybody in the audience, if it looks stuttery here, we're pausing. All right, we're back. We're hopefully figured out our video issues. So,
all right. So where was I? Yes, comfort food. So this is why I brought up the McDonald's analogy. And we saw this with all the kneeling nonsense and the turnoff it had for people. Is you took the beef tallow out of the grease. I don't want the fries anymore, and especially now where we have so many more options with our entertainment time and dollars, when people want to, sit down and indulge in a big old plate of fried chicken,
hey man, fried chicken is my comfort food.
Exactly. And so when you have options, do I want to grab that stale, crummy fried chicken bag that's sitting in the deli at Walmart? Or, you know what? There's some good places on the way home, or now I just ordered on my phone and they bring it to me. I don't need your, crummy, stale chicken. I got good stuff I can buy. So I don't need your crummy woke product. It's not hitting that spot anymore. It's not getting that serotonin boost. I've mentioned before, one of the things that we like about intermittent fasting is that when you kind of break that psychological hold that bad foods tend to have over you, it makes it easier to make it worth the calories. So like, for instance, I like donuts, but I like donuts. But if I'm going to have them, now that I've kind of broken that psychological hold, if I'm going to indulge and break my diet with some donuts, I'm going to get some good fresh ones. I'm not going to get the crappy little packaged ones that are just, that 2-second serotonin hit, but really they're not that good. So.
Yeah. So when I was running a gym, we were a couple doors down from a donut shop. And that was when I was really experimenting with the fasting. And I did my first 48-hour fast, and about hour 36, I'd walk outside and I could smell the different flavors of donut. I was like, oh, they got some jellies over there. I might go get it. And then I could smell what people were cooking in the neighborhood next door. It was amazing. Just the difference in your sensation when you've been without for a little bit versus when you constantly indulge. It was amazing.
Yeah. And so if you take a little break from the traditional American comfort food here, I mean, it used to be, the line Whitlock used that I thought was really good is, baseball is America's pastime, but football has become America's passion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the thrill is gone, baby, because you've been stepping out with the wokeness, and it's killing the passion. All we want is to sit down, And I mean, it doesn't exactly have to be, Ditka and Butkus, but can it at least be a little closer to that? Can it at least just be football and not all this other garbage
Mhm.
when we deal with
They've
this
been
garbage
really
stuff?
trying to do that these last few weeks, though, but in a way that's like disregard all that happened in the past, just with this whole cancer movement that we talked about last episode.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really trying to distance themselves a little bit, but then they're still like, instead of Latin history or Latin Heritage Month, which is supposed to be going on right now, they're doing Latinx.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're still there.
Yeah.
You're still
Go
there.
next time you see a crew mowing your yard, go call them Latinx and see how they respond to that.
uh
Woke whiteys are the only ones who use that term. Well, woke whiteys and then the hardcore woke Hispanics, but the overwhelming majority of Hispanics would look at you like you grew a third head if you called them Latinx.
Yeah, pretty much. Go ahead.
But the other point, the final point I had on why football is comfort food, and this comes from Charles Cook. So Charles W. Cook is I think he's now the head editor at National Review, which is a conservative, magazine and think tank, and he's a British immigrant. I think last year he got his citizenship, and he is hilariously more American than most Americans. Like he loves guns. He's a very outspoken proponent and protector of the Second Amendment. He loves to go out shooting. He loves NASCAR, which even you and I don't really like. So he loves NASCAR, and he absolutely loves football. And his explanation for why he loves football so much is so amusingly British. Well, you see, when you watch soccer, it's like a series of solos. Everyone's out there doing their thing, and it's one after the other. But football is an orchestra. It's a symphony. And he's right that, as much as I like baseball, it's a series of individual events and actions.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking, and this came to mind when you were talking about kicking, is you've got to, oh geez, oh sorry, ankles aren't supposed to go that direction. I accidentally saw that, and I don't like that.
Do we got another injury to talk about?
Yeah, one of the DBs on the Giants rolled his ankle because he ran into somebody else's leg, and it didn't look so good. But so you've got all the line that has to block and do their thing, and each one matters, because if someone blows an assignment, then someone comes through and he blocks the kick. But then the kick itself isn't just the kicker. I mean, the kicker's got to think, his timing, his pacing, his plant, and all of that. But then the holder has to think about, getting, placing, spinning, finger, and then the snapper, even before that, has to get the timing down right and put the ball right there where it catches in time and comes down in time, so that it all syncs up with that plant kick. And other sports aren't really like that. I can't think of another sport.
Let's go to pitching. Let's put this together with a pitching analogy. So the pitcher has to do all these things, right? So if you want to equate it to kicking a field goal, someone's got to toss a guy a ball, and the guy's got to put the ball in the pitcher's hand with the seams in the right spot for him to throw the pitch he wants to pitch. So if you want a four seam fastball, someone's got to toss a guy a ball, and he's got to put it in the pitcher's hand when he's back in that external rotation on the four seam for him to come forward and complete.
And it's all got to happen in a couple seconds.
A couple split seconds.
Yeah, I guess it is probably 1, 2, boom. So it's like a second.
Yeah, it's about a second for the kicker to make his full move. So you got two movements that have to happen before that second happens. So it's and when you talk about adjustments, the kicker might be able to make an adjustment seeing the ball in a different spot, but he's got to do that in real time.
Right.
So everybody talks about what's the hardest thing to do in sports. Here's my answer to that every time. The hardest thing to do in sports is to be the best at what you do in sports.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what it is. Everybody says, oh, it's hitting a baseball. Oh, no, it's hitting your spot as a pitcher. No, it's kicking a football. No, the hardest thing to do in sports is being the best at what you do in sports.
For crying out loud, Tiger Woods was so good when he was good that he made people like golf. He's still good, but he isn't dominant. The way he dominated the sport, and ever since his decline, there have been some young guys that have come along. Is this the next Tiger? None of them have managed to do it. They've all been, like McIlroy and some of these other kids. Yeah, they've all been good. They've all won, but they have not dominated the way he did. That's how hard it is to do.
But remember, even when you dominate for a little bit, every year has a new crop of people who are the select cream of the crop of millions of people trying to be that cream of the crop. So if you're a professional athlete, never let up. Ever let up. Eric Cressy had an article, and it was about training, but I think it's very specific to just sports in general. Is just rest is never an option, was the name of the article, because he was talking about injuries and things like that. You can always do something, even though I got this right here. But for those that have me on social media, you saw my post about exercising everything but this shoulder. And just rest is never an option, because there is always someone looking to take your place. And it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do at all. Even if you're a burger flipper at McDonald's, someone else is trying to get a job. They've got 50 applications every time they look at a freaking board on when they want to hire. So if you're a burger
now, but we'll talk about economics some other show.
Oh God. Yeah.
But it is a great analogy. And because I'd mentioned, personally, if I rest on my rest days, I usually feel worse the next day. Because I've got to get up and, oh geez, they just showed the ankle again with he has his sock in his shoe off, and oh yeah, that's not good. That's a lot of swelling real fast.
Well, the ankles do that though. That's part of the problem with ankle injuries, is you got to get them iced and compressed and elevated really quickly to evaluate the damage.
His foot turned, a full 90 degrees because he ran into someone's leg that wasn't going anywhere, and that ankle's got a lot. You talked about the stable, mobile, mobile. That ankle's highly mobile. So
inverted or everted?
Everted.
So
that's inside, right?
Yeah. So the big toe went up.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a deltoid tear if it's swelled that much. Deltoid ligament is 3 ligaments on the outside of the ankle, and they make a triangle, which is why they're called the deltoid. And if it rolled that much, I would probably suggest that it probably was at least 2, if not all 3 of them, which is major surgery coming up.
I was about to ask, is your guess that that's going to have to be surgically repaired?
Yeah, I'll watch it after we're done. But yeah, if it really rolled up that much and the swelling was that bad that quick, then yeah, we're probably looking at
on the just above that point where the ankle sticks out for everyone who knows, and then right above that was like a big old fat hematoma looking thing. So
okay, so we got okay, there we go. So it'll make a triangle like that, and so this one will tear first, this one will tear second, this one will tear third. And if it rolled up that much and it's that bad of swelling, I would assume it's at least somewhere in this range. Maybe this one's just partial, but at the same time, this one still has to be surgically repaired. Once you have a complete tear like that, they have to be surgically repaired, as we all know. So, by the way, I've got my Waco University High shirt on from one of my interns that works there now and is their head strength coach. Can anybody in the audience, which is only you since we don't do live yet, name the most famous football player to ever come out of that high school? He is in our generation. He is almost exactly our age.
Still playing?
No, not still playing, but he is
Okay.
on TV still commenting.
No clue.
San Diego Chargers and New York Jets.
Went to New York and San Diego. Drawing a blank.
Hold on, let me get the right.
Oh, that was Barkley. Oh, wow. I thought that was the DB. That was Saquon Barkley. So,
You get that?
I forgot he went to the Jets. I'd completely forgotten that. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Early career.
I didn't even know he was from Texas.
University High School in Waco, Texas. So, but one of my former interns is the strength coach there. Pretty cool dude. Also teaches English, I think. But that's secondary to the point. Ladainian Tomlinson was the answer to the trivia.
He was quite a beast.
He was.
The way he would work.
He was the
off-season.
guy who could have taken Emmitt Smith's record had he kept going at the pace he was going.
Mhm.
And what was the injury? Was it a knee injury?
I think so.
I think it was a knee injury, and it sidelined the whole thing. The other person, who was the other person that could have taken Smith's record? I could tell you who it was, and it was different than a knee injury that sidelined him.
Well, didn't Frank Gore do it simply for being around so long?
No, Frank Gore.
Or did he get close?
We're talking about 18,000 yards.
Yeah, but somebody got really close, and it made me go, "What?" Because I didn't even realize he'd been in the league that long.
Hold
And
on, I gotta look up Frank Gore's.
I thought it was Gore. Wasn't he with the Cardinals last year? Because that's when it came up. It was with the Cardinals in a Cardinals game, and I said he's still playing and he's still grinding out that much. But I'm trying to think of explosive backs because there was another one around that time.
Played for a while, but he was sidelined by something.
Contemporary with Tomlinson, because that same era.
Yeah, our era. Yeah.
Who was the other back that was? I know there was one.
Okay, Frank Gore ended up with 16,000.
Okay.
And on the dot, 16,000 yards, and he ended with the Jets. No, Emmitt Smith ended with the Cardinals, and he got the record with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I remember that.
So Frank Gore retired apparently after 2020.
Was he with the Titans? The guy you're thinking of?
You're thinking of maybe Derrick Henry.
Well, no, but he's now. But I thought there was a Titan before Derrick Henry that.
Oh no, it's not who I'm thinking of. You're gonna kick yourself when I say it.
Probably. Who?
AP.
Oh, duh.
Adrian Peterson. He was also on pace to.
Now that one I remember wasn't that a non-contact ACL?
Okay, so he had that, but he even after that he was still on pace.
Yeah.
To beat Emmitt Smith, but he was knocked out of the league for a year suspension for spanking his kid because he left a bruise.
See, I didn't even remember that. I just remembered him talking about it on a show or a podcast, talking about disciplining his kids, and everyone lost their mind because, oh no, he spanks his kids. Yeah, like the majority of America.
Yeah, knows his ex-wife apparently posted pictures of a bruise on the kid's butt, and
okay,
and he got suspended for a year for abusing his children.
How are you sure that came from a spanking and not from falling down? Because kids do that when they play.
No, he admitted to it.
Okay.
But at the same time, he was suspended for a year for spanking his kid, and he was on pace to do it. And then after that year, he started doing well, and then kind of had this roller coaster career after that. But
I had to go to the scrap wood pile and pick out my own 2x4.
Pick your switch, or I'll pick it for you.
Yeah.
Or the wooden spoon.
I broke a couple wooden spoons.
Yeah, we broke the wooden spoons too. Well, I say we broke the wooden spoon. Someone broke the wooden spoon on our butt. But yeah,
And we are better off for it.
for the most part. For the most part.
For the most part. Now, obviously, if that, I mean, obviously it can cross a line and then you start creating psychological damage rather than psychological conditioning, which is what disciplining should be. Just like when you discipline yourself, like we've talked about disciplining yourself to get to, to exercise daily. That requires discipline. That is conditioning yourself psychologically to do these better behaviors. Just, and the inverse is true too. And we've seen it, that you can negatively condition a child if you never discipline them.
Mm-hmm. Or you can negatively condition a child if you over discipline them.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a balance to it. Good gracious. Is this not a great lead into our free will discussion, even though we wanted to talk FBI today?
I'm procrastinating because I don't want to talk about it because it's so depressing. I will, since you brought it up, I do want to give an example of that balance personally that amuses me to this day. I only wish I could remember it, but I was so young I can't remember. When I was real little, Mom and Dad had spent weeks in between work putting new wallpaper into this house that they'd bought. As always, it needed a little work because that's what Dad likes. So they had been putting wallpaper in, I think in our room, in my room. And for anyone who doesn't know, because wallpaper is, out of style, it takes a lot of work, because it takes a lot of work just to prep the wall first. And then you have to, get it on there nice and smooth, takes some work. Apparently, after it was done, I went around the entire room with a red crayon and, like, at my height, just made a line all the way around. My mom was so mad that she couldn't discipline me. So she said, you just sit there until your father comes home. And then he was so mad I didn't get a spanking because he knew he was too mad to do it. So he just made me sit. So what they ended up doing is I just had to sit there on a stool doing nothing while my mom scrubbed off the crayon. So while she was in there cleaning it off, I had to sit there on a stool and do nothing. I never got a spanking for it because they knew they were too mad to do it.
How somber do I want to make
discipline, this? It would have been anger.
How somber do I want to make this? Do I want to go into history?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so I can give, with exactly the same person, a good example of proper discipline versus abuse. Right? So when I was in third grade, this was already when my mother was with my stepfather, who was quite abusive. He was, and we'll go into that in a second here. But this is the proper form of it. When I was in third grade, I had a teacher that made you write the vocabulary words 10 times with the definition all week for like 3 times a week. And then you took the quiz on Friday. And I thought I was smart. I was a pretty sharp kid, but I was a little bit uppity in my intelligence there. And I refused to do the homework because I knew the words and I knew the definitions.
So why bother? I don't.
So why bother? I'm not going to write it 10 times with the definition 3 times a week because I already know the words. I could pass the quiz, and I passed every quiz, but I brought home an F because I had a 0 in the homework part of the grade category. So I brought home an F in third grade vocabulary, and my stepfather saw that F and he said, well, time for some punishment. And we got the belt out, and I never brought home an F again, right? Because you have to learn to do the work, even if you already know the answer, because that's called good study habits, right? which I didn't learn till I got to college, and I didn't have good study habits because I was able to coast through high school with just kind of good cognitive habits. So that was a lesson that I should have learned then, and I got punished for it. That was proper discipline. Now, that exact same person would also do that discipline when I brought home an A because you think you're so smart. That is improper discipline, right? Because it was his jealousy that caused that to happen. So we've got the same person, two different situations where one was proper and one was not, and they were the exact same result. So yeah, discipline needs to be very well thought out before you do it, but at the same time, it is necessary. So there is no either or on this side of the argument. I'm trying to wonder how we even got this down this path.
Adrian Peterson.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Adrian Peterson. So
but it is an annoyingly good segue into what I said I wanted to talk about, but I don't really want to talk about, because my big frustration with what's going on is that there has never been any discipline. There has never been any punishment. So when you look at Michaela Maroney's testimony about the FBI and say, how in the world could they do that? Well, because they had been conditioned negatively, because there is never any accountability. And that has been happening more and more and to greater and greater degree at the higher levels of our society. And I don't just mean in the government, because I'm pretty sure we are headed towards a really nasty economic crash. And it will be because the people who caused the 2008 crash didn't have to pay for it. They didn't have to pay for it financially because they were bailed out. So what should have happened, what usually happens, I say usually, but what used to happen in those situations is you screwed up, you got greedy, and you went bankrupt. So now you either have to just trudge along like the rest of society, or what has happened in a lot of examples with very successful people is they rebuild their fortune. They make another fortune and they learn from those mistakes. Well, there has been no discipline. So why change your habits? And I'm not entirely sure. Let's see, which one do I want to start with here? All right, so I'm going to go back in time a little bit to talk about some FBI malfeasance. And let me back up a second. I think this is an important point, that I don't remember who I heard talk about this in regards to, it was someone who wrote a book on the 2008 financial collapse. And they made the point that, yeah, it's true that there were some big people at big financial institutions that were responsible for a lot of this, and they never had to pay a price. And that's a problem. But it's also true that while Wall Street never had to take accountability, neither did Main Street, because us normal folk were so busy pointing the finger at the big Wall Street bankers that we never pointed it at ourselves and said, hey, how many of us were taking advantage of those nonsense deals, those too good to be true deals that helped lead to the collapse? Because remember, a lot of the 2008 collapse was because people were buying homes they knew they couldn't afford, but they were getting what turned out to be temporary sweetheart deals when it came to their mortgages. And then when that all collapsed, they could no longer afford to make those payments. So how many of Main Street looked at themselves and said, I need to learn from this because I put myself in this situation, you know, kind of like all the dang kids clamoring for student loan forgiveness. You took out the loan, jackwagon. Anywho, so, and the reason I bring that up is because how many people who look at some of the stuff that the FBI has done, like the gymnastics team, because that should be pretty nonpartisan, right? Because we're not talking about a political figure under investigation or indictment. We're not talking about a political issue. I mean, we're talking about girls who were being sexually abused. That should be completely nonpartisan. But you're muted there, Samo.
Well, it is partisan because the FBI has their fingers in so many other things. And if you discredit them in one arena, you have to question everything in all those other arenas. And so that's where it becomes partisan. Yeah. The gymnastics team should be nonpartisan, but the entities involved are cross boundaries.
Yeah.
So that,
and this is where my Main Street versus Wall Street analogy comes in, is what I'm going to be talking about here and what I'm going to bring up are documents related to the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. There are a lot of people who refuse to acknowledge that that entire investigation was a hoax. There's no other way to say it. And this is, again, someone who does not like Cheeto Jesus and is kind of hoping he doesn't run again, because I think he's bad for the conservative movement and bad for America. I honestly do. But the facts are the facts. And how many people jumped on that bandwagon because Orange Man bad and fed this institution with it? You know, there's a lot of people who want to talk about institutional racism. What about institutional corruption? And it doesn't even have to be, you know, the kind of movie villain corruption that I think people think of. You can have institutions that become corrupt, like we talked about last time. You can have institutions that become corrupt simply because they become so insular and arrogant that they cannot see their own faults. They can't, in their mind, they can do no wrong. And that is the best case scenario for what we talked about last time, and what I'm going to talk about this time about what was going on in the FBI. Is worst case scenario, they purposely went out to take out a political opponent because they were on the other side ideologically. Best case scenario, they were so insular and they were so self-important that they couldn't see that what they were doing was a grotesque miscarriage of justice. And I'm going to start with,
did I make it to where you could share
this one? I don't know. I'm about to find out.
Hold on. Nope. Here we go. Should be good now.
Share screen. Sussman. Okay. So I'm going to try and lay this out, and I hope that, and so since you don't dive into this garbage as much, you're my test case here to hopefully make sure that I'm making sense.
Okay.
All right. So John Durham is a federal prosecutor who was appointed as a special prosecutor to look into how the Trump-Russia investigations get started. And he just released an indictment. Now, I didn't want to be colored by the commentary on this. So I did listen to one guy, but that's because even though he is a conservative commentator, Andrew McCarthy is also a former federal prosecutor. He is the guy who prosecuted the case of the first World Trade Center bombing. I don't know how many people remember that in 1993, Al Qaeda tried to bring the towers down. That was actually their goal with that bombing, is they thought if they could destroy the supports of one tower, it would collapse into the other one. And he prosecuted that case. Okay, so he is very good. One of the reasons I like him is because even if I don't agree with him, I know when he's giving me his opinion. He makes it very clear when he's giving you his opinion on something and when he's explaining the law to you. So this indictment may seem a little silly to some, but as McCarthy explained, that's probably because the statute of limitations was about to run out on this. So he filed this indictment so that he could start making charges against this one individual, make this charge against this individual, and keep the other investigations going, because there's a lot of things that are linked here, and there's a lot of explanation before you get the actual indictment's a short paragraph, but it's like a 26-page document because he's laying out what seems to be a larger case of corruption and malfeasance.
Not to interrupt you here, but a 26-page document seems like nothing after all these 5,000-page
Oh yeah, no.
Documents going through Congress, and it's like, how did you read 5,000 pages from 2 in the morning to 5 in the morning?
You didn't.
You didn't.
You didn't.
Yeah.
No. And you're right, because I've got an inspector general report that's almost 500 pages here in a minute, and we're not going to go over that whole thing. So in a nutshell, who Michael Sussman was a lawyer who worked for the Democratic National Committee in general, and then in particular for the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. Now, what the charge is lying to the FBI. He brought information into, we're going to go in the Wayback Machine here. And remember, the Trump-Russia collusion stuff started with stories about financial ties, okay? And that all originated from Sussman and the people he worked with here to help create this narrative. But beyond just creating a media narrative, he took this information to the FBI, and when he took it to them, he said, "I'm just here as a concerned citizen. I'm not working on behalf of a client," which was a bald-faced lie. So what this was, what this connection was there was a server that was communicating with a Russian bank. Okay. And so that was spun in the media, and then Sussman told the FBI, and this is what started the FBI's looking into this stuff, was that this was a back channel communication between Trump and Russian oligarchs. Well, it turned out, and it very quickly turned out, that all this was spam. You go stay at a Best Western, they've got your email, and they're going to send you periodic emails to say, save 5% on your book now and save and blah, blah. That's all this was. It wasn't even owned by Trump. It was a marketing subcontractor, basically, that was used to send out these kinds of emails to people who stayed at Trump properties, which happened to include somebody who was a higher up at this Russian bank.
You mean someone who has money in Russia spent the night at a Trump hotel?
I don't know why you would want to stay in a gold-plated hotel if you're a Russian oligarch. It's a mystery to me.
I mean, golly, must be a conspiracy.
So when Sussman went in, he provided what are called white papers, which are basically just, think of a research paper you do in school. And it's the same basic thing. Is I'm going to write a research paper. I'm going to hand it over to to show you this information that we have gleaned. And he made out that he was, again, just a concerned citizen because he wanted to get the ball rolling. And as is stated, and they have documentation, this was on his part, simply because if you can say that the media is investigating, or the FBI is investigating Trump, then it doesn't matter if the investigation goes nowhere. It doesn't matter if the investigation is founded on bogus information. Simply that headline is going to be enough to stain that campaign. The problem here, and how this ties into the FBI, is because the FBI kept going with this narrative. And so even on this particular point, the FBI quickly learned that the allegations nevertheless concluded that there was insufficient evidence to support. So the FBI investigation revealed that the email server at issue was not owned or operated by the Trump organization. Great. So then why did the FBI keep pushing into this Trump-Russia connection? You've already determined that this big thing of these financial ties turned out to be nothing, and yet they wouldn't give it up. The other disturbing thing about this indictment is that it lays out, and I'm hoping that he's going to go after some of these other people. And it makes me wonder, hold on, how did the FBI not uncover this when they started looking into these allegations? How is this not illegal? Why didn't the FBI do anything about this? Because one of the ways they were able to get this information that Sussman passed on to the FBI is because Sussman was also a lawyer for a tech executive at an internet company that isn't named here. That internet company works with the US government basically on domain name assignments, DNS data and these kinds of things. So they have access to private data for this purpose. Well, and there's another one. I'm not going to go into all the details because it gets kind of funky later on. And there was another company or another research group that was doing the same
send
thing.
me the link to this document so I can put it in the show notes.
So it will go into even further detail. Basically, the people who were conducting this investigation that they then handed over to the FBI were using this private data that they were only granted access to for cybersecurity purposes, but they then use that data to make searches to try and find any connections they could between people in Russia, high-ranking people in Russia, Russian banks and executives, and Trump and the Trump organization. And so far as I can tell, now maybe something will come out of the Durham investigation and we'll see some indictments for these people, but how did the FBI not look into this? That's terrifying. Okay. And the reason I want to focus on the Trump-Russia investigation is because think about this. He's independently wealthy, whether he's a millionaire or a billionaire, who cares? He's very wealthy. He was the president of the freaking United States. He was the leader of the free world, the most powerful person on the planet. If tech executives in collusion with the FBI, in collusion with agents of the Justice Department can do this to someone of that stature, what can they do to you if you cross a line that somebody doesn't like? I want to pause there for a second. So, all right. So before I go into my next set of documents here, I want to get your perspective, Sam, on one, am I making sense here? But also, before you give your thoughts on what I just said, I'm also curious, did you have any idea about any of this information? Had you heard this before?
I've heard parts of it, yes.
Okay.
And a little bit of an idea, but my thoughts actually go to where I kind of always start from when I deal with anything, whether it's the COVID stuff we talk about, or the FBI, or even general health. It's a complex system. And what you brought forward was an attack on a major public figure, which would be Donald J. Trump. And the strategy is different when you said, well, what can they do when it comes to just you as an individual? The strategy is different because where is the cost benefit analysis for their actions, right? And so when we look at us as individuals, me and you, or such and such group that happens to get it together online, or whatever, or just an individual person who has questions, there's a different strategy to it. And now we can go back to what we talked about last time with the Governor Whitmer stuff. The Wolverine militia, they're a bunch of nobodies that had a little group online. The FBI strategy with them was different. But it still aligned with their ultimate goal, which was to pin everything to domestic terrorism, right? Or in this case, with the story you brought up, Russian collusion. So the strategy is different. And I think the same concerns can be used to identify the different strategies, and the same skepticism. So that's where I come into it, is we should apply the skepticism to anything they do, whether it comes out as such and such scheme brought to justice before it could happen with a domestic terrorist group, versus this big giant story where the Durham report is coming where basically it was based on a bunch of assumptions and lies for the Russian collusion. So I think the same strategy, different targets, or different strategy with different targets, but the same goal.
Right. And the concern needs to be there because, you know, so someone like Trump that the FBI decides to take down, or even, wittingly or unwittingly, justifiably or not, in their minds at least, ultimately he's going to be okay. He's got plenty of money. He can hire good lawyers to make sure that, he doesn't get railroaded, and then he's going to go on to live a physically comfortable life. Okay. But what about the you and me's of the world? Okay. Because
let's look back at January 6th.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up.
Yeah. The you and me's of the world could end up in custody with no chance of a trial for quite some time, because of basically halting the system to kind of work around the speedy trial that we're allowed as a citizen. And which is actually our
violation.
Yeah, which is actually should be our major concern with the January 6th people, is because if they're going to find all these loopholes to get around a speedy trial for them, well, you look at the social justice movement. Isn't this what you complained about in the 60s?
Yeah.
So
so is justice what you actually want, or is special treatment for you and punishment of your enemies what you want? Because it sure looks like the latter right now. Well, when you look at how people are being treated.
Definitely okay. So another example that's come up recently is the DOJ being kind of sicked on the parents speaking out against school boards. I mean, wow. I mean, I have a problem with you teaching CRT in my school, so you're going to come after me as a domestic terrorist?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, so the ones that are making violent threats, yeah, they should be accounted for in some way, whether it's prosecution or at least a slap on the hand and a threat of prosecution later.
But one, that's a local law enforcement issue, or at worst, if local law enforcement can't handle it for some reason, a state law enforcement issue. And two, so far as I've been able to tell, there have not been any arrests for any of these encounters.
It's still the threat of it that's bothering me, because
Well, but even if there's a threat of violence, I have not been able to find any sort of credible threat of violence. And
there have been threats of violence, but at the
Okay.
same time, they're not being separated from.
I hadn't seen that, but what I was looking for was
Oh, just look at
criminal-
the sheer number, and you can make sense of it, because the sheer number, there's going to be a certain percentage of idiots out there that are threatening violence.
Yeah, but what I was looking for was criminal investigation or indictment, because threats are not protected speech, because that's a call to action. Okay, that's not speech anymore. So I was assuming that if there were indeed threats of violence, that law enforcement would have gotten involved. And I wasn't able to find anything in my looking, but I do want to go down that rabbit hole at some point, because I was listening to an investigative journalist talking about this on Friday, and I haven't had time to go look into it. Fun fact, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, his daughter and son-in-law run a company that is involved in teaching CRT. They have multi-million-dollar contracts with various school districts to go in and teach this stuff.
That I did not know.
Isn't that an amusing little conflict of interest?
Slightly.
Speaking of conflicts of interest, that leads me into my next document here, which I'm going to just do this one quickly. Where are you?
While you're bringing that up, I just want to use a word that's being thrown around. Things that are being censored and acted upon by law enforcement as misinformation, when CRT in and of itself is misinformation. If you really break it down and you go through the ins and outs of it, and it blows me away. But go ahead.
Okay, so all right. So this is the more recent Office of Inspector General report that I'd mentioned before. And I want to bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, because it's a good example of how you do research. Because this led me to a link of a much more extensive report that I knew about earlier, and I'd kind of gotten them conflated because I didn't realize which was which here. But the other reason this one is interesting is because of how it ends up excusing the FBI for violating procedures. Okay, so the FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it set up foreign intelligence surveillance courts. And because these operate outside the normal bounds of due process, the protection there is that they are supposed to have multiple layers of oversight. Okay, that and then the final point of oversight would be the court itself, that would look at these requests for surveillance and decide whether or not it met the criteria. Okay. Now the Woods procedures that they reference here, these were the internal FBI procedures that were established to make sure that as they say here, the scrupulously accurate information was acquired and then provided to the court, so that the court could see that, one, they had plenty of brain fart, they had plenty of probable cause for these surveillance warrants, one, and two, and most importantly, I think, that they they could not get this information through normal warrant procedures, which I think is the big kicker, and makes you scratch your head and wonder, why are there so many FISC warrants issued, and why were any of them issued in this case? Because all of the people involved are US citizens. Why couldn't you get a normal warrant through the normal process? But I digress. They looked at in all 29 applications we reviewed, which were approved. So they looked at 29 FISA applications that were all approved between 2015 and 2019. And in those 29 applications, they found 209 errors. But the DOJ only deemed 4 of those errors material. So those are errors. And then an additional 200 instances where these procedures that, again, were put in place to protect our civil rights from abuse, since it's not following the normal due process procedures. 200 additional instances of non-compliance with these procedures. Now,
you highlighted a lot. I'm trying to
I did highlight a lot here, and I'm trying to kind of in real time think of how to most precisely explain all this. So this is one of my annoyances with this report is they recommend a number of reforms to make sure that these Woods procedures are followed. But then the two things that jumped to my mind was, one, okay, those are reforms going forward, but what about the mistakes and abuse? These are abuses of power. Whether they happened intentionally or accidentally, it shouldn't matter. These errors and omissions are abuses of power. So was anyone punished? I was never able to find out if anyone was ever punished for this. So far as I know, no. Two, did they at any point acknowledge or recommend or even address the fact that, is the cure worse than the disease, which is something we have talked about a lot these last few weeks? There are so many errors and omissions here. Do we need to reconsider this FISA process? And that's where this next highlighted portion comes in. Court authorized FISA physical search and or electronic surveillance is, according to DOJ and FBI leadership, one of the most important authorities available to law enforcement to combat terrorism, clandestine intelligence activity, and other threats to national security. At the same time, physical search and or electronic surveillance pursuant to FISA is one of DOJ's most intrusive investigative authorities, and the use of it unavoidably raises civil liberty concerns. Moreover, FISC proceedings are ex parte, meaning that unlike most court proceedings, the government is present, but the government's counterparty is not. And FISA orders generally are not subject to scrutiny through subsequent adversarial proceedings. As a result, the FBI and NSD FISA application process is critical to ensuring the DOJ officials asked to authorize FISA applications and judges on the FISC asked to approve them have a complete and accurate set of facts in the FISA application on which they can rely. Pause again. Why are you excusing something that you just said is a significant threat to civil liberties, just in and of itself. So what you just said basically contradicts that last sentence. What you just said basically says that last sentence isn't possible. Certainly isn't always possible.
It seems like there could be a better way to do this, though. Okay, so I understand that warning somebody you're going to be spying on them basically would lead to different behavior, which would lead to covering up your actions. So I can understand that point. But at the same time, before it can be used against you in court, you should be informed.
And again, the bigger problem here is that, so, and this is my confusion with the whole FISA process in the first place, especially as is used in these examples that I'm going to bring up here. There's secrecy to a normal warrant process. If you know, mob investigations, the big RICO cases against the mob that Giuliani brought to bring down the major families, they got numerous warrants and were able to keep it secret. And so surveil these mob families for a long time and keep it secret. So again, why is this necessary? Because when that then goes to court, all of the information surrounding those warrants are available to the defense. So the defense can look at how these warrants were approved, and they can challenge those facts and say, hold on a second, you got a warrant by lying to the judge or something to that. You got a warrant and you omitted this key fact that would have let the judge say, no, hold on a second, you don't have probable cause for this. You don't get that in a FISA court because everything is classified, because everything is so heavily classified. And the reason it's supposed to exist is this part here. Okay, so
while this is loading, I want to put a different concern in there. Is we've talked about this with digital media before, with just our own people's perception of what we talk about is clipping. So if I don't know to defend myself, I don't know to save the documentation. So to record the conversation, basically. So if you record the conversation we're talking and you want to use it against me, and I don't know that you're going to use that against me, and I don't record it, you could clip that however you want. And you can make it sound as good or as bad as you want it to be. And if I have no counter evidence, then I have nothing to use in court.
And then you compound that with in the court of public opinion, especially, but then even in some of these kind of secret proceedings, or especially in regulatory proceedings, the burden of proof is on you. How do you prove a negative? That's why even in the court of public opinion, we should still have the burden of proof on the accuser, because the accused is absolutely screwed if they have to prove a negative.
And
unless,
they
you say,
they need to be able to produce the original, whatever, digital or analog. It really needs to be analog. It needs to be originally taped in analog and then produced digitally, because at that point, then we can say, oh, they cut this and this and this out of there, which you can't cut out of the analog. So they need to be able to produce both. There's got to be some sort of regulation around this.
Right. Okay. So the whole point of FISA, of the act, and then the courts is a significant purpose of the electronic surveillance and or physical search is to obtain foreign intelligence information, and that such information cannot be reasonably obtained in normal investigative techniques. And then down here, this next part is that again, as part of the application process, the applicant needs to establish probable cause to believe that the target is a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power, and that the target is using or is about to use the facilities or places at which electronic surveillance is directed, or that the target owns, uses, or possesses, or is about to own, use, or possess the property to be physically searched. The FISC may approve the physical search and or electronic surveillance of a U.S. person for a period of up to 90 days, subject to renewal. So again, the point of this act was supposed to be, okay, the Rosenbergs, infamous Soviet spy case back in the 50s. So we've got these people that are Soviet agents. We need to be able to surveil them with the utmost secrecy, because we can't have the foreign power. We can't have this hostile foreign power, the Soviets, clued in on what we're doing. Now, again, I still don't understand when it comes to the foreign part of it. I don't know why you need a U.S. court to surveil a foreign power, but fine. I guess if they're on U.S. soil, fine. But the U.S. citizen still should have those U.S. citizen protections. Now, if somebody who is familiar with these procedures and is familiar with the intelligence community could explain how and why a U.S. citizen should not have the normal protections because of the secrecy of the investigation, I've yet to find someone who has actually explained that. And that's again where, well, let me jump into the next document here while I'm getting my thingy up. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, you're gonna have to get your thingy up on your own on this one.
All right, let me find. Okay, so
well, I'm in a moment of too many thoughts to have one pop out. So
oh, I can't find the part here. Okay, so my last document here is the much longer Inspector General's report on specifically the 4 FISA applications that were used to surveil members of the Trump campaign looking for Trump-Russia contacts. And again, let's remember that part of it wasn't at least according to the Inspector General here, it wasn't the originator of this particular investigation. But part of the narrative and the idea that there were back channel contacts came from a completely bogus report handed over by a lawyer for the Clinton team. Okay, so we've already looked at that to know that that is at least in part coloring the perception of this idea of Trump-Russia collusion. So now we're going to get into this specific investigation, which was called Crossfire Hurricane. So if you've heard that term, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the FBI investigation into members of the Trump campaign team to see if they had any ties to Russia or were acting as Russian agents. Now, where I got annoyed here right off the bat is that on a number of occasions right at the beginning, the Inspector General basically excuses the FBI because when they point out things that to any rational person would be an abuse of power, they then say that the appropriate or the relevant internal procedures were followed. Okay. So basically, the FBI can get away with murder if they get to define murder.
Let me bring this back to one of my themes for all of this is every system is going to be gamed, and so they successfully game the system.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what the Inspector General is saying here, as far as I'm concerned, is the FBI can abuse your civil liberties so long as it follows its own internal procedures regarding the investigation.
Yeah.
How does that make sense? As another analogy, you remember a few weeks ago when the Freedom of Information Act emails, Fauci emails came out, and he was before whatever that committee is that Rand Paul is on, and Rand Paul was grilling him on, you said, do you wish to change or retract your previous statements on gain of function research? And Fauci said, of course not. You don't know what you're talking about. We have never funded gain of function research. I didn't lie to the committee previously.
To which he changed the definition of what is gain of function research.
Exactly.
It's the old Bill Clinton. It depends on what your definition of is.
Exactly.
Defense. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, a month ago, you were funding gain of function research, but now that you've changed the definition of what gain of function is, you're no longer funding gain of function research.
Just
Isn't
like
that
I don't have to
magical?
perform a racist act individually to be racist because we've changed the definition of what racism is to be a systemic hierarchy of values to which if you support the current status quo of the hierarchy, you are racist.
And that's a perfect analogy to lead into this because, as I said a little earlier, that these people are so the woke social justice warriors are so concerned about systemic racism, and yet where they have to kind of tie themselves in rhetorical knots and play around with numbers and logic to demonstrate institutional racism, you don't have to do anything except look to see institutional corruption and abuse. So let me figure out, I'm trying to figure out where to jump to here to tie this up as quickly as possible. And I think I'm going to jump right here basically to the conclusion here. All right. So again, this particular OIG report was just looking at 4 FISA applications that were renewed several times to focus in on 4 members of the Trump team.
Let me cut you off for a second.
Okay.
When you highlight, you're supposed to bring up key points, but you highlighted the whole page.
That's because these were going to be my key points, but then I realized that this is going to take forever. So let me look through my highlighted stuff here and find the key points, the important key points.
The important key points. Okay.
Yes.
Continue.
Okay. So again, the OIG basically excuses the FBI's conduct leading up to the investigation because they followed procedures. Remember those text messages that came out between members of the FBI talking about how they were going to get Trump, and that was looked into and they said, nothing to see here. Well, one of the reasons there was nothing to see here is because the Inspector General said, well, yeah, those 2 people obviously demonstrated an inappropriate bias against Trump, but they weren't the decision makers. Okay, well, no, those two weren't the decision makers, but they were in on the decision. They were advising the decision makers. And yes, you don't have text messages or emails from the other people who made these decisions with such brazen partisanship. Right. You don't have that. But what you do have are their actions. And how are their actions not brazenly partisan? Okay. So the basically the conclusion here in the front, the short version is they found 7 key problems with these FISA applications. Okay. And these were either mistakes by the FBI or information they knew and did not relate to the FISA court. But I'll go farther than that, because what the OIG is saying here is by FBI guidelines and procedures, all of this information should have been provided to the FISA court, because the court itself is acting as both parties. So you're supposed to provide both sides. So the court can weigh it and say, no, this isn't sufficient probable cause, or okay, even despite this, that's kind of exculpatory, the probable cause still tips the scales and this warrant is approved. But I'll go farther than that. Is what you're going to see here are instances that should have killed the investigation. So just forget the FISA surveillance warrant. How did the investigation continue in light of this information? Here's the most damning one. So omitted information the FBI had obtained from another US government agency detailing its prior relationship with Page, Carter Page, who was a lower level staffer in the Trump administration. And he was accused of being a government agent. Mm-hmm. And this was entirely based on a conversation that was reported by an agent of a friendly government. So it's given a certain amount of weight because it's coming from a friendly government. Including that Page had been approved as an operational contact for the other agency from 2008 to 2013, and that Page had provided information to the other agency concerning his prior contacts with certain Russian intelligence officers, one of which overlapped with facts asserted in the FISA application. I want to stop there because, again, we'll link here.
Yeah, because you highlighted the whole thing.
Oh,
again.
Shut up. Yeah, I highlighted everything. All right. I'm gonna stop there though, because that one point.
It's obviously all important.
It is all important. It's all infuriating and depressing. I was getting really depressed reading this crap last night. You know what that other agency was?
See, FBI.
No, this was the FBI. The FBI were the ones with the shenanigans. You were on the right track. CIA.
CIA. Yeah. Okay.
According to numerous other reports, that other agency that the OIG doesn't name was the CIA. Carter Page, who was accused, who kicked off this entire Crossfire Hurricane investigation, was being accused of being a Russian agent. And the FBI knew that he was a CIA contact. But it's worse than that, okay? Because when that part there about there being overlap, this is what that means. So Carter Page, through his government work, as happens, that staffers will meet with other staffers, or people of a certain position will meet with other people of a certain position. So Carter Page had a conversation with a Russian official. That conversation was used to initiate the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and was used as evidence handed to the FISA court to say, see, we think he's a Russian agent because he's having contact with this Russian official who we know is up to no good. That conversation was detailed by Carter Page to the CIA. They left out that part so that they could accuse it. Okay, so basically, it's not this big a deal because he's an operational contact. He's not an agent. He's not a source. But just imagine that that James Bond is accused of being a Russian double agent because he's having a conversation with Pussy Galore. Well, he's having a conversation with Pussy Galore because he's a MI6 agent. But if you leave that part out, then
can't be using that word on here. Come on.
The new James Bond movie is out, so it came to mind, and it seemed the most. It seemed the least annoying way to make my point because this stuff is so infuriating. And again, so far as I know, no one has been punished for this stuff. All that is happening here is that the inspectors generals, I don't know which one you're supposed to pluralize, are simply saying that the internal procedures need to be modified and they need to be more strictly followed. Hold on a cotton picking minute. We upended our entire country for 3 years with this Russia-Trump collusion nonsense that turned out to be a flat out lie. That Carter Page one is especially egregious. And in fact, he's suing the FBI over this because it was so egregious.
But you'll never know that.
You'll never know that.
You'll never know that. Including because we said it because nobody watches this. But shoot, again, it's a matter of too many thoughts versus no answer to what we're talking about. Let's talk about our whistleblower, our Facebook whistleblower. Where, she has FBI contacts, and all of a sudden this is there's a political agenda behind the whistleblow. And it's like, this to me makes me think of all the fools out there that still think Kane Brown was an internet sensation on YouTube, that made his name by making videos on YouTube. When I'm like, this guy was already signed by a record label, and they decided, hey, we can use this guerrilla marketing technique to make a name of somebody that we already want to have as one of our contract employees. And all of a sudden there's 5 million views before anybody even knew who he was. And so you see the same thing with this Facebook whistleblower, where it's like, oh my God, she's so brave and she's coming forward and all this, but she has 60-minute interviews before anybody knows who she is. And anybody who's in any kind of media knows that takes a lot.
That was lined up well ahead of time. She
That
also
was
has,
yeah.
She's got a PR team
Mhm.
that is heavily involved in left-wing causes. She herself has been heavily involved in left-wing causes. And it's all look over here, and just completely ignore what's actually happening here. Look over here, orange man bad. And let's completely ignore the fact that the FBI, an institution that used to have some of the highest degrees of confidence, bipartisan confidence across the United States, and now if you stop paying attention to the jazz hands shouting orange man bad and actually look at what happened, it is incontrovertible that they violated the Constitution, civil liberties, who knows how many laws pertaining to civil liberties.
Well, in fact,
yet it doesn't matter.
she's a proponent of bringing the cabal back.
Mhm.
What we talked about is the cabal with the Time magazine article and everything. But yeah, her whole mission is to make that the norm.
Yeah.
What went on, but also just the again the celebrity part of it all. We would throw in another name. It's like Greta Thunberg is a random girl, right?
Right.
A random girl concerned about her future. No, this is every bit of this is planned ahead
Our
of time.
parents are activists and they're connected with other activists.
Yep. And she just happened to be articulate. And this
and the fact that she looks like she's 12 makes it hard to attack her.
Well,
oh, you're beating up on a child.
Yeah, she's
No,
just
not. She just
concerned
looks like
about
she's
her
12.
future. And it's like, we kind of all are, but whatever.
Yeah. Welcome to adulthood, darling.
Yeah. But yeah, it's
this is how concerning this is to me. And I'd mentioned this last time, but this is what I was really talking about when I say this could actually make me vote for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump came out and specifically talked about even if you're not naming names, at least talk about the kinds of people who need to be investigated and probably indicted if they broke the law. If they didn't break the law, they at least need to be fired and never work in government again with how they conducted themselves. If he specifically came out and said, this is going to be my second term, clean, because there was a lot of rhetoric about draining the swamp, and yet it never happened. Okay. Again, this is what is infuriating to me about people on the right who are the opposite of the orange man bad of, yeah, Trump is Jesus. No, he talked about a lot of things that were very important, but didn't actually do anything. All right. So you want to talk about the deep state. Okay. Well, he had a chance to do something about it and he didn't. Now, if he comes out and very specifically says, this is what I'm going to do and this is why I'm going to do it, I would actually vote for him, because that's how concerning this is to me. That accountability needs to what?
Said, let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that, because ideally it would be someone better than that. It would be someone who didn't make things worse. But yeah, he shined a light on a lot of important issues, but he was also standing in the middle of that light because he can't help himself. He has to be in the middle of that spotlight. And so rather than talking about the swamp, we end up talking about Trump. Okay. But this is the swamp, is an FBI that, in order to take out someone that they feel is a bad person or is a danger, or maybe they just don't like him politically, the reasons don't matter. They grotesquely violated the civil liberties they are supposed to be protecting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who it was. Hold on. Jonathan Haidt. He said the only thing worse than a two-party system is a one-party system. And I think that's part of the problem is we're in a two-party system.
Yeah.
And there's no heterodox thought at all. It's just team A versus team B.
Well, no, I thought you were going somewhere else. I think it's worse than that, because I think we're in a one-party system.
Well, we're on our way to it. But the problem is, because of the way things are set up, which is actually because it is better than a one-party system, we have the opportunity to come out of it. But the part that's bad is it's that pendulum swing we always talk about, where it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The only problem is the harder it swings one way, the harder it's going to swing the other. And right now we're in a real hard swing to the left.
Yeah. And that's and that was my point about where I thought you were going to say we were in a one-party system, is look at there are two Democrats opposing this ludicrous spending bill that's going to spend us into oblivion. Two.
And thank goodness for those two.
Yeah. And one of them is being harassed. There's no other way to put it. Not only harassed in the colloquial sense, but in the legal sense, even in a one-party consent state. So one-party consent state means that you can follow Sam around and film him and ask him questions. You said it. Okay. And you can post that online because Texas is a one-party consent state. You cannot follow him into the bathroom and keep filming. That is illegal. That is very illegal. And yet, as you mentioned earlier, the FBI is going to be looking at people who get irate at school board meetings. But the president is saying, well, that's just part of the game, getting followed into the bathroom and harassed. No, that's not part of the game. That's illegal.
No, it's not. Yeah, because I run a gym and I still run exercise programs out of my home, and there are laws that do go with the one part. So I can film you if we're in a public space because that's the one party consent. I could record you on a public conference call if I'm in a one party state, but I cannot record you in the bathroom because there are rules on what's considered a private.
There's no expectation of privacy if you're out on a walking trail. There is an expectation of privacy if you're in a bathroom stall.
Yeah. So when I had the gym, I could have a camera in the corner recording the whole gym and it'd be fine. But I could not have a camera in the bathroom because that would make me a creep.
Not without going to jail.
Not without going to jail for many very good reasons.
Yeah. And so that's on the Democrat side, just those two senators. And yet on the Republican side, for reasons that I cannot fathom, there were 10 Republicans who went ahead and decided, yeah, we'll join in with the Democrats and extend this debt ceiling a little bit farther because we can just, money is magic. We can just make it out of nowhere.
Yeah. Again, frustrations abound when it comes to the federal government, because all us down here, we're just trying to do the best we can to make it through the day.
Yeah.
And then we see something like that happen and it's like, why even try? Really, why even try? But
and those Republicans that went along with the debt ceiling partial raise is basically what it was, to extend things into December. They didn't want to upset the apple cart. This is their gravy train. Their political power is their gravy train, and how they achieve ludicrous amounts of wealth on public servant salaries is because they are well connected, they have the power, and they're more concerned with keeping that status quo than actually doing something that's right.
Yeah, and sorry about that last little mute there. I had a lot going on in the background that I had to mute up everything. So,
well, that's what happens when you have a herd of sled dogs.
Pretty much. We probably should close this out because we've kind of exhausted this horse. Everybody knows the FBI, CIA, everything is kind of fucked up right now. So,
and this is one of those things where people, again, it should be bipartisan. People should be able to, on the general principle of, hey, we need a clean house and we need to make sure that these organizations of law enforcement and intelligence gathering are staying within their lanes and not abusing people, no matter who they are. We can argue about other elements of law enforcement and intelligence gathering at another time, but the first thing we need to do is say, hey, let's fix this mess so we can at least have faith that they're at least trying to do the right thing. They're at least trying to follow the Constitution and the laws and the guidelines to make sure that they don't create a miscarriage of justice when they're supposed to be on the side of justice.
I think that's a good lead into next time, because I think we kind of talked about this before, but we've never really followed it up in comparing collectivist societies to individualist societies. And from my standpoint, the evolutionary biology behind it, and where things have kind of been turned on their heads with the United States of America, because we're such a melting pot of everything. And because realistically, that leads into where the responsibility lies and where the trust has to lie. Because if you're a true authoritarian collectivist society, you want a lot of power in those institutions, because they keep everything in line. But if you're an individualistic society, they really, really, really infringe upon your rights as an individual. So I think that actually leads into a good conversation we can have of how we stand as a society and as a people when it comes to what our biological makeup is conflicting with the current political I guess scene at the moment.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good place to leave it off, and next time we'll try and get back more into the philosophical instead of these annoying particulars that are making me so annoyed.
Well, I think we can combine the two. I think we really could combine the two. So yeah, I actually had some recent thoughts on how the identity politics is playing into what the genetic makeup is of the United States. So it's a tangent I've gone on, and it's kind of disrupted my thoughts for a little bit, but I think it's a good topic spinning off of what we just talked about. I know you wanted to talk about certain drugs not to be named.
That which shall not be named. Yeah, we're going to get into that soon, but because of what it is, we want to have, all our points bullet pointed, all our lowercase j's crossed.
Which
so
that topic's actually easier for me than what we talked about today.
Yeah,
because it's easier for me to read the medical research than it is for me to speculate about government agencies, I think. But
all right, well,
they all play into it. But
so that's a couple of teases of what's coming down the line. So we will see y'all next time.
Awesome. See you then.